Okay, good. So we have group 1 done, and we're gonna go to the group 2 here. Now I'm gonna, of course, use my same click and drag method so I can quickly bring these two images in, and then we're gonna edit them. Now, of course, the first thing we're gonna have to do here is to create a box again. Now, when you create new layers, you notice every single time I create a new layer as I place images, I'm always make sure the topmost layer is selected. That's because any image that you place, any new layer that is added, that is via the new layer option or via placing images, because placed images will always show up on a new layer. They will always be placed or added above the selected layer or group. So always make sure you use that to get an idea of where your images are going to be placed in the layer stack. Layer stack is basically how your layers stack up here, right? Remember, the topmost layer is always going to be the most visible. So as you're building your image, take that into consideration. Now we're going to add a new layer. Now it's important to note that when you're adding the new layer, your group is closed. It'll be closed because, of course, you'll see that little fold icon there, which indicates a group. That's a closed group icon. When you collapse it, it's going to show an open folder, which means that this group is currently open. If you try to add a new layer while the group is open, it's going to end up inside the group. So please make sure that you do not make that mistake. You need to make sure a group is closed so that your new layer ends up outside the group. So we have our new layer here, and now we're going to create a box in this area here. Of course, we're going to be skipping these little spaces, as you know. So we're going to create the box. Now we did it a minute ago using the marquee and fill, the select and fill. We're going to use the shape tool this time. So we're going to go to our shape tool here, and we're going to look for the rectangle tool. Keyboard shortcut is U. And of course, the rectangle tool is going to create a rectangle, which is, the same size of the box. It's the same shape, same dimensions. So when you select the rectangle tool, you're going to notice here in your options bar, you have a few options here to change. The first is this little drop down menu here that lets you select one of three types: shape, path, or pixels. Now, of course, if it's on shape, it's going to create a box, but it's going to be it's not going to be made up of pixels. It's going to be made up of vector. It's going to be vector based. Now, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. As you know, the box that we create is not going to be a box that we're going to be editing, or it's not going to be a box that we're going to be manipulating via pixel, using pixel based edits like adjustments, or even in some cases some filters, right? So if you know the box is just going to be a generic box, you can use the shape tool. This is for future reference. You don't have to go through the whole added work of creating a new layer first, because once you create a shape, it will always create a new layer for that shape, right? So that's very important to note. The shape tool does have the added benefit of creating new layers for itself, so you don't have to actually create a new layer first. So it's much faster to just create a shape. Also, it does have the added benefit of being able to change colors whenever you want, so that can be very vital and important. However, since we are demonstrating the use of the shape tool to add pixels, we're going to be selecting the pixels option here. Of course, once you select that option, you have to have a new layer, because you cannot add pixels to a layer that isn't supporting pixels. So you notice this new layer is a blank basic layer, image layer, or pixel layer as they're called. So we're going to just, of course, make sure white is the foreground color. And we're going to click and drag and create a box. Now this box is going to be made up of pixels, so we're good. So we're going to call that white box 2. Oops, white box 2. And there we have a white box 2. Now the next step here is to bring in the images. So I'm going to use my click and drag method, and I'm going to locate the two images. Now one of them I know is I6, and the other one is accessories. So I'm going to click and drag both of them in. Now, usually when you select, if you select multiple images, to click and drag into your document to place, the last one is usually going to be the first, meaning that the last one selected is going to be placed first. It's going to be imported first. So I'm going to just scale that down, put that here, and I'm going to hit enter, and then of course you notice the first one comes in here. So you usually select them in the order that you want to import them, right? Of course, I don't need to scale this too much. I think this is already mostly fine. So that should be good, right? So we have our two images, and of course, one of them we're gonna have to edit. We're gonna have to make some changes too. All right. So the accessories is fine. We're gonna leave that as accessories. I6 is also fine in terms of name. Now you'll notice that both of these images have this little thumbnail. This means that they are smart objects. Now whenever you place images that you plan on scaling or changing the size of, you should always make sure that they are smart objects. They're going to be smart objects if they have this thumbnail. If you hover over the thumbnail, in some cases, it should tell you whether it's a smart object thumbnail or not, right? Now, it's not currently showing me that, but generally, if the thumbnail has this little icon here, it's a smart object thumbnail. Usually, images you place will come up as a smart object, meaning that the data is going to be preserved. So if you scale it down and you try to scale it back up, it shouldn't have any loss in quality because the program is going to tap into the original file data, which is going to have the original file size. All right. So always make sure that once you plan on bringing images into Photoshop that you want to scale, make sure that they are smart objects. In some cases, you might try to do something like remove a background, and they will say you have to rasterize the image, right? So you have to do a process called rasterizing, which means to flatten or pixelate. So certain effects you can't add to a smart object because it might be made up of multiple parts and it has other data that needs to be removed before you add certain effects. In cases like that, what I would suggest is you do make the changes while the image is at its largest, and then you convert it back to a smart object by, of course, right clicking, convert to smart object, or going to your layer menu, and of course, well, smart objects, convert to smart objects, right? So those are the two ways you can convert that. Now we're going to be editing this smart object here, I6. Now that can be edited by double clicking on your smart object thumbnail. And once you double click on the thumbnail, it will always open up your smart object in a separate window where you can edit it. So always remember that. Anytime you want to edit a smart object, you can edit it in another window and then it will be updated in the current document. So I'm going to double click the I6 and here we have the image opening up in its own window. Now, very important to note, usually with smart objects, whatever format it was originally in is the format it has to be saved in, meaning that if you make any kind of changes to the structure of the smart object, you will have to save it as a new smart object. It totally makes sense because the data is going to change. So naturally, you'll have to save it as a new document or a new image. So here, when we're finished, we're going to have to make sure that this is a background again. But since we're now editing it, we're going to unlock this background by clicking the lock icon there. And we're going to have to do a few things. One of the things we're going to have to do here, of course, is to remove the background. And of course, that's going to be a little bit hard to do with the text here. So we're going to isolate these two sets of areas, or these two images, these two areas of images here, areas of pixels, I should say. So we want to have the the text on its own layer, and of course everything else on its own layer. So what do we do? Well, first thing we do is we select the area that we clearly want to separate. So we're going to select this area here. When you go on your marquee selection tool, you're going to notice I'm on my new selection. What new selection does is, of course, every time I make a selection, it's going to be new. But in this case, I want to select two areas. So I will have to either put on the second option here, which is add to selection, or I can use my shift key and I can click and drag, and this will also add to selection. So you can use the shift key to add to selection also without having to go to the option. Now that we've selected the area, we're good. We only have to now separate these two. So we want to create a new layer from this area that we have here. Since it's a layer-based option or a layer-based command that we're looking for, we go to the layer menu, since most likely it's going to be under there. So we know we want to do something new. So we go to layer new, and we have a bunch of options, but at the bottom here we have the two options we really want to look at. Layer by copy and layer by cut. Now layer by copy can work. It's going to create a new layer with this area that we select, but it's going to be a copy, meaning that the original image is still going to have that area, right? It's still going to have those pixels. What we really want to do is a layer via cut, which will cut that out so that the original image does not have that area anymore. So here we have layer 1 and layer 0. You're going to notice now that that was cut and placed on its own layer, right? And I'm, of course, toggling the visibility, right? I usually do that, or you should also usually do that whenever you want to hide and show certain pixels. Doesn't mean that you can't edit them. For example, if I hide this layer here, right, I can still move it. I can still move the pixels. You notice when I put it back on, they're moved, but I can't see them. So it's important to know that you can still edit them. They're not locked. They're just hidden. The visibility is just hidden. So we have these two sets of pixels on their own layer. I'm going to hide layer 1, and I'm going to basically go to layer 0 and trying to remove this background. So how do we go about doing that? Now, this image is a very high quality image. It has very defined edges, and the background is in one contiguous color for the most part. Contiguous meaning that it doesn't change its shade. It's in one color for the most part. It might have shades of gray there, but they're very, very, very close to each other. So we're gonna use one of the point-based selections. Anytime you're coming across uh, selections where the area that you're selecting is based on a color range, you usually use a point-based selection method. Now, what I would suggest is either the quick selection tool or magic wand. Both of those tools, which is the fourth tool in the tool panel, will get the job done. Uh, but of course, the faster one is the magic wand. Now the magic wand will allow you to make a selection. When you select it, you click, you make the selection, uh, and it's controlled based on the range. So all you have to do is click in the background, and you're going to get to select like this. If you want to decrease or increase the, should say, the range of colors, if it's selecting too much of your pixels, you can lower what is called your tolerance. So you see up here we have this little area on the options bar called tolerance. You can lower that. The lower that is, the less intense, or I should say the smaller the range you select. So you have to play around with that to get the desired result. So we can use the two tools I would normally recommend in case of selecting especially background areas or areas here image that has one color, uh, is of course I would suggest the magic wand. I will also select the magic eraser. And then the magic eraser is a little bit different. Where the magic wand lets you select the area so that you can maybe mask it, the magic eraser will delete that area. So it doesn't just select, it doesn't select at all actually, it just removes. Now of course this also works with tolerance, so you make sure the tolerance is at a level that will get the job done, and you just click in the background and that's it. It will remove the entire background. Alright, so the magic eraser, I have my tolerance at 10, and that works. So far so good for that layer. I'm going to take out the visibility there, and I'm going to put on the one here on layer 1 so I can see these pixels. Now these pixels are very small, so I do not want to have to do any changes to them. However, the background around the pixel, as you can see, is not white. It's clearly not white, and we want it to be as close to white as possible. So we're going to use some adjustments to fix that, right? Now, for you guys wondering when I zoom in like this and I'm zooming back out so quickly, that is the Control+0 keyboard command. That lets me zoom to fit on screen. So it is essentially under the view menu also, and it's very convenient. So how do we go about making this brighter? Pretty straightforward. We will have to add an image adjustment. So if you go to the image menu, you will see adjustments, and you really want to use the brightness and contrast. Now, we don't really want to mess around with the brightness too much, but we definitely want to mess around with the contrast, which will make the whites whiter and the darks darker. So you notice as we carry that contrast up to 100, the image starts to look much better. The color is not completely white, but if we inspect it using the eyedropper tool on the tool panel here, you're going to notice that it is basically 1000, which is very close to white. It's completely uh, completely impossible to notice with the blind eye, with the naked eye, not the blind eye, right? It's completely easy to notice with the naked eye. So it is easy to notice with the completely easy to not notice with the blind eye also, but that's a completely other thing, right? So you can notice it here because we're using the eyedropper tool, but you won't be able to notice it if you're looking at it on a paper in print. So we've done that. We can add back this layer. We add that back. We put back on the visibility. And now we want to flatten down this whole thing. We want to go back to that original, right? If we try saving this, you're going to notice that they say, yeah, I can't save this document back to its original format, right? And that's because, of course, the smart object has changed its structure. So we're going to have to get back that original structure. Now, anytime you want to basically combine all your layers into one and flatten your image, you have to, of course, use the flatten image command. Now, that can easily be found by right-clicking any image, any layer, and going to the flatten image option. What that will do is I will take all the layers that are visible, and it will flatten those layers into one, right? So it will flatten it into a background. You notice here when I decide to do it with a hidden layer, it asks me if I want to discard hidden layers. So make sure that the layers that you want to flatten are all visible, right? And now we have our image back to being a background. The background here is white. Around this part here is going to be 1000, but again, it's impossible to notice with the naked eye. So I'm going to save this, and now, of course, it saves. And I'm going to go back here, and boom, it's fine, right? So that's pretty much how that works. Now we have our image. It blends really well with the background, and we're good, right? Now the last thing we're going to do, well, the second to last thing we're going to do here before grouping these layers is to hide this area here. Now we know how to hide that. We've hidden that using the select and mask. So you know how to use the select and mask method because we've done it before. But we're going to go about doing it a little bit differently. We're going to use another method of hiding pixels, which is called the clipping mask. Now, the clipping mask is the fastest and most, in my opinion, yes, the easiest method to use in order to hide pixels. But it is based on another layer. So in order for it to work, another layer has to be basically another layer has to be created that is going to cover the same area that you want to show on the layer that you're clipping. What that means is that in this particular case, we want I6 here to be hidden. We want the bottom part here to be hidden. But if we're going to clip it to a layer, the layer that we're clipping it to must have the areas here visible. Now, fortunately for us, the white box 2 here, this is the area that we actually want to show. So we can just clip the I6 layer to white box 2. Now how the clipping works, generally the only criteria for doing it is to make sure that the layer that you want to clip is above the layer that it's using as its reference, right? So we're going to call white box 2 here the reference. So I6 is going to refer to white box 2, right? Now, it's the same concept as if you would have marquee and then applied a layer mask. However, it's much quicker because it's a one-click process. So you can right-click I6 here, and you can go to create clipping mask, or you can go to the layer menu, and you can go to create clipping mask here. Control Alt G is a keyboard shortcut. When you hit that, it's gonna clip to this white box 2, which is the reference layer. You'll notice if I decide to increase the size or decrease the size of this reference layer, the clipped image or the clipped layer is going to be affected, but not directly. You notice only the white box 2 is being affected. So in this case, they treat the reference as the mask, right? And they treat the original image, well, this is still the original image. You can still move this around, but it's clipping to another layer. This is very good in cases where you might have multiple images that you want the same area to be shown for, but you don't want to go through the process of creating a whole bunch of masks, right? Clipping mask is really good in that case. So always remember though, when you're using clipping mask, you have to have a reference layer, right? So in some cases, it's easier to use the marquee because with the marquee, you don't have to create a reference layer. You just have to mark the area, select the area, and then add the mask. So it's completely up to you. So we have our accessories I6 white box 2. We're just going to group them together. We're going to color code them, and we're going to save our progress so far. And that's that.